We are delighted to welcome Sir Stephen Hough to KMFA today. He is well known to classical music fans primarily as a virtuoso pianist. He's also been named one of 20 living polymaths by The Economist. He is a visual artist, an author, and a composer who he was granted a knighthood for his services to music in the year 2022. And first of all, welcome and thank you so much for being here, Stephen.
My pleasure. It's a great pleasure for me.
There's lots of musical stuff going on in your life right now. We just found out that your recording of the complete Chopin waltzes is being reissued. I think the release date is April 11th, if I'm not mistaken. And the most exciting thing is they're more complete now than when it was first released because there has been a new discovery. And I want you to tell us about it, but also what goes through your mind when you hear about a new Chopin waltz?
Well, yes, I was approached about a year ago by Jeffrey Kalberg, who's been very much involved, a Chopin scholar in this. And he sent me this manuscript and also a sort of transcription of it in modern notation. What did I think? Did I think this was by Chopin? Because we're not absolutely 100% sure. There could be doubt. And so I thought at the time, not sure really about this, and I had some questions about the notation. And then it sort of sat there in my inbox. And then he was in touch again because it was going to be premiered and going to be performed and published. So I looked at it again, and actually I was more convinced the second time because I thought if this is something Chopin scribbled down in someone's visitor's book, which I think is the most likely thing. I don't think this is actually so much a piece, well, it's not really complete, that he meant to have published as such. But I think he wrote it down quickly, and so some of the mistakes that I thought meant it might not be by Chopin, I think actually they are authentic in that it was dashed off. And so I think Lang Lang was the person who actually did the world premiere of it. And he's recorded that track. But no one's recorded all the waltzes, including this, yet, I don't think. Maybe someone will get in before April the 11th. So basically, I had to go into the studio and just record this one waltz. And now it is completely complete. Unless somebody discovers something else. That's one of the joys. You can always find a scrap of paper tucked at the back of something else. But it was very touching to get this. It's, I think, an early piece of Chopin. It's that period where the music has a lot of brilliance to it. And actually, I have a slightly different take on it from Lang Lang, because it's in A minor, and Lang Lang plays it in a very expressive way, very beautifully. I think it's part of that series of Valse Brilliant. So actually, I think it's fast. I think it's like one of the faster mazurkas, one of the faster waltzes. So mine is much more sparkly and light in conception. To Lang Lang's, which is more like the other A minor waltz, which is the number 3, which has this deeply melancholy way. But it just shows us that even with the piece that's not Chopin's greatest piece, there are different ways to interpret it.
Absolutely. Well, we will look forward to playing that on KMFA as soon as it's released. And then you have another recent release called, I believe the CD is called The World of Yesterday, and it is your piano concerto with that subtitle. And there's a story behind this work, which I would love for you to tell us. But I'd also like to know, do you find yourself looking back more at this point in your life, or has that always been a part of your mindset?
I love living today, and I think it's, well, we don't have a choice, do we? But it is the best moment to live in the present moment, and I think it's very important for all of our mental health. But I think it's also important to treasure the past. And I think as you get older, you realize that it's easy to destroy things and not so easy to build them up. So I suppose that is a kind of conservative with a small c that I think all classical musicians have within them. We're looking forward, of course, and as a composer, I'm very anxious to be playing contemporary music and not just my own. But I think also we're friends with people in their music who lived 200 years ago. And that's something marvelous, really, to me. I don't feel that this is a museum of dusty old artifacts. This is a living tradition And Chopin and Liszt, these pieces were radical when they were written, and I think they still are. And I think there's a great danger that we think that everything has to be new. Our phones have to be the latest model. And so we live in that kind of world. But classical music, I think, is the corrective to that, because it stretches across the centuries. And indeed, classical music itself is, I don't know any other profession where you can be 15 years old or 90 years old and be colleagues. And this happens. There are pianists still playing in their 90s, and there are wonderful young players beginning their careers. And there's no sense of this is better than that, or we're all in this together. And so I think that's great, because I think the modern world tends to put people into categories far too quickly and too easily, and things and people become disposable too quickly. So I would say that's my feeling about the world of yesterday. One shouldn't dwell in it in an unhealthy way, always feeling that things were better in the past, because that's not true. But the particular tag comes from the book memoir of Stefan Zweig, called The World of Yesterday, and it's his memories of old Vienna, really, and the world before the First World War, which he grew up in, the cafes of Paris. It's a wonderfully evocative book, much recommended. And because, this is a long answer to your question, but because this piece, this World of Yesterday piano concerto, came out of a film score that I was invited to write during the pandemic. And I had a lot of time on my hands, and I thought, what a wonderful way to spend it, to do something that I wouldn't normally have time to do. So, and the story of the film was about a concert pianist writing a piano concerto in Vienna in 1930. The film actually fell apart, but the ideas of being in that country at that time stayed with me, and I kept my sketches, and so made this piece really out of the sort of ideas that had come about for that film.
Well, I read your article in The Spectator about it, and it wasn't quite clear whether or not the film was going to be made, and it's too bad, because I was kind of fascinated by the premise of that, so who knows,
Yes.
maybe it'll get picked up someday.
I hope so. Well, I don't know what the director has in mind. I very much doubt that I will be any part of it, but I know a number of actors and some directors, and, it's movies of the, only about 10% of the ones that are planned, even to a late stage, actually end up getting made. Scripts are written, they're wonderful, actors fall out of a project and something else comes up and the funding is so it's a miracle when any movie gets made. But I think this one, he sent me the script for it, and I was really taken with it. This aging Austrian baroness commissioning a young American composer to write a piano concerto based on the sketches that her sister left before she died. And so the psychology of it, the baroness, we realize, is a little bit of a psychopath, and he escapes and plays the piece a year later, the premiere of the piece. I think the movie would be terrific, but we'll see.
And so that is a recent release called The World of Yesterday. It's on the Hyperion label, and folks can find it. I believe it's out on vinyl also, is it?
It's vinyl, CD, and and all the streaming platforms, yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I did want to ask you just one more thing about your career as a writer. So even as an author, your interests are diverse. You've written a novel, a memoir, and a book of essays about music. And I'm just curious, what was more challenging, a novel, a work of fiction, or a memoir about your own life?
Well, they were different challenges. Memoir is, of course, holding up a mirror to yourself, and that can be a terrifying prospect. It's called Enough, and that's part of what's behind this. I tell only what I want to say, so that's enough. I could say more. I was very conscious of writing about colleagues and people who are still alive. You don't want to embarrass them, and so there were things left out. I've been asked about writing Volume 2, but I really don't know, because Volume 1 ends just at the beginning of my professional life. So I leave Juilliard, I've won the Naumburg competition, and I'm about to set out on the road. So many people are still active and alive. And it's not just criticizing people, which, obviously everyone you meet in your life doesn't delight you in the same way, particularly conductors, but also the ones that you want to praise. If I say that this person is fantastic, then this person is going to say, well, do you not think I'm fantastic too? So you open up an awful lot of problems. The novel, of course, you're creating a completely false world. And I found it interesting. It's a story of a priest who's lost his faith and is being blackmailed. I was interested in the priesthood at one point in my life, so that I know a lot about that side of life. I've read a huge amount of theological works, and I've thought a lot about this. But the character of the priest really has nothing to do with me. So that was interesting to try to get inside the mind of somebody who's depressed, and thank God I'm not, or who's feeling that everything in life has been a complete failure, that everything he's lived for has just fallen apart. But I think the idea that of being a priest at one point, and I think of all of us, is a sense of compassion. And what I wanted in this book was to show someone at the bottom of the ditch. What does it mean to get out of that? There's come a point in a human life when literally everything is lost. And I don't think there is. I actually don't think anyone, maybe one can draw a couple of people from history and say, well, really, him, her? But I do think that there's a chance for everyone. I mean, it partly comes from a Christian faith that I have, that no one's ever abandoned, no one's lost. The greatest point of despair has a solution. And I find that keeps me going in this life. And I wanted to try to get a sense of that in a novel. And of course, the one person in history, perhaps, that, at least in Western history, that we've thought about was the figure of Judas. What is it about the one who betrays Christ? Is there hope for him? So in this book, I've tried to make him actually the most faithful of the apostles. So that was an interesting challenge. But anyway, I suppose it's called The Final Retreat, and it's not on ebook, but it is available still as a real paper book.
Well, I found a used copy, and I read it last year, and one of the cardinal rules of writing a novel, that no matter how, loathsome a character is, if you can make your readers identify, and they don't have to like them, but if you can identify with the character and even care about them, I mean, then you've done your work, and you did that beautifully. So.
Thank you. Thanks.
So I have one more question for you. You touched on it a little bit earlier. I wanted to ask you, if you could have dinner with one composer, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Oh, I think it would have to be Liszt, actually. Partly because he's been part of my musical and professional life throughout. Partly because I think he would be a fascinating person to talk to. And also because I think he was interested in many of the things that I am. He had a big interest in theology, of course. And he was a man of great generosity and compassion. And so I would be very interested to, who wouldn't want to hear Liszt play? It's one of those, he died, he could have recorded something. If he'd lived just another decade, really, we might have heard how Liszt played. So it's one of the great unknowns. So I would treat him to a wonderful dinner, and then I'd lead him to the piano and ask him just to play something. It would only have to be a few chords, but I would love to feel something of that magnetism that he must have had. I think he was the greatest musician of the 19th century, not the greatest composer, but all round he was the beginning of conductor. He was the first person routinely to conduct other people's music and make almost a sort of technique out of what is it like, not just to facilitate a performance and pull everything together, but actually to create a performance with your own personality. He really gave the first master classes. Certainly he was the person who invented the term recital, which we're going to be doing this week. Every time we use that word, we owe it to Liszt, who had the idea of putting it together with music. Compositionally, he was right there before Debussy and that whole world of what we think of as Impressionism. Wagner probably would not have been Wagner in quite the same way without Liszt. Bartók would not have been Bartók, and that whole world of this sort of the primitive rhythmic sounds. So he was there at the beginning of all of these things. So I love Liszt, and so yeah, he would be my my dinner companion. But I'm actually a little bit shy having dinner with one-to-one. So can I have a couple of others
It can
just
be a
to
dinner
break
party,
up the
absolutely.
conversation?
He was also almost the first rock star because how he whipped his audiences into a frenzy, so.
And the travel he did in those days, you know, from Russia down to Spain and, you know, often just on a horse and cart, and incredible, yeah.
Well, Sir Stephen, this has been such a pleasure, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.